Hello, everyone. I'm Kenshin. Welcome to History Talk. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. Today's historical mystery is: why can't U.S. presidents serve more than 2 terms? As the founding father of the United States and its first president, he's someone everyone should know. He served 2 consecutive terms from 1789 to 1797, holding a unique position in American history. Not only did he lead the Revolutionary War to victory and establish the federal government, but he also promoted maritime trade, reclaimed territories occupied during the federal period, quelled minor white uprisings, implemented impactful land policies, and, most importantly, ensured peace in the United States. These achievements earned him high acclaim. As his second presidential term neared its end, there was still a possibility of him being re-elected for a 3rd term, as there were no constitutional restrictions at the time. However, he firmly refused to run for a 3rd term. In September 1796, he delivered the famous farewell address, convincing Congress and informing the nation, elaborating on his vision for governing the country and ensuring its security and prosperity. History highly praises Washington's retirement, considering it a courageous and noble act of selflessness. However, despite extensive research by many historians, the true reasons behind this unexpected decision remain inconclusive. Even his return to Mount Vernon did not clearly indicate his thoughts. Historians can only speculate on the reasons for his refusal based on his life experiences. In 1789, when he assumed the presidency, the United States of America was in its infancy. With each of the 13 states governing themselves, the national treasury was empty, and debts were towering. Besides a few offices, there was virtually no centralized government, and aside from several hundred army officers and soldiers, there was no other military force. As he began to establish a central government and political system according to the Constitution, he perhaps realized that anything decided at the inception of the new government would have enormous and lasting consequences. History indeed proved this. Abandoning the tradition of lifelong presidency, he established the precedent of serving 2 terms and then retiring. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution stipulated that the president was the head of state and chief executive, elected indirectly by state voters through an electoral system for a 4-year term. With significant powers and no term limits specified in the Constitution, some feared the presidency would become a de facto monarchy, with even Jefferson calling the American presidency a reproduction of monarchy. In fact, he was deeply committed to the principles of Republican democracy. In 1824, Jefferson noted, "He repeatedly told me that he would shed his last drop of blood to support people's opposition to any attempt to change the constitutional Republican form." He originally intended to retire after his first term, but due to various persuasions, it didn't happen. However, as his second term neared its end, he decisively chose retirement. On September 17, 1796, he announced he wouldn't seek a 3rd term. He further stated, "Although favoring it might preserve the office, you must believe in the current situation, I cannot but agree to retire." His voluntary retirement broke the long-standing tradition of lifelong presidency, establishing the 2-term precedent for U.S. presidents. Even though the U.S. Constitution didn't mandate presidents to serve only 2 terms, no American president violated this custom until Franklin D. Roosevelt. Roosevelt's 3 consecutive presidential terms were necessitated by the urgent circumstances of World War II, requiring continuity in diplomacy and military affairs. In 1951, driven by the Republican Party, the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution was ratified, formally limiting presidents to 2 terms. This amendment turned the tradition of presidents serving 2 terms into law. However, Roosevelt served only 2 terms. Apart from personal reasons, societal and political factors played a role. As a founding father, despite his high standing among the people, he faced significant challenges and dilemmas. From the outset, various interest groups within the states clashed, reflected in the political differences between Hamilton and Jefferson in the Washington administration. Issues such as the adoption of laws, establishment of a national bank, consumption taxes, and Western development presented conflicting perspectives. Acknowledging that political differences were inevitable and sometimes necessary, Roosevelt advocated for mutual tolerance and temporary concessions. Despite his efforts to mediate and reconcile, partisan conflicts escalated, leading him to contemplate retirement before the end of his first term. When news of his intention spread, efforts were made to persuade him to stay. Jefferson remarked, "If you continue to lead, the North and South will unite." Even Edmund Jennings Randolph wrote to him, "When the country calls you to govern, you choose to retire. If another civil war breaks out, can you stay at home? It's much easier to disperse these small groups now than to subdue them when they appear armed." These words persuaded him to seek re-election for one more term. But in reality, it can be said that Quankson is almost no different from us now. How so? During his second presidential term, partisan strife increased rather than decreased. He even faced criticism himself, indirectly getting involved in the whirlpool of party strife. The issuance of the Neutrality Proclamation and the Jay Treaty with Britain faced fierce opposition led by Jefferson's Democratic-Republican Party, leading to a surge in grassroots movements advocating for democracy. Around 1790, grassroots societies emerged everywhere, with a total of 47 established nationwide in just 7 years, opposing Hamilton's anti-democratic measures. When the Whiskey Rebellion occurred, he blamed the rebellion on these societies, condemning them as self-appointed and evil. Mentioning his name anywhere in the United States at that time would spark controversy, with opponents calling him a dictator and pro-British, demanding his removal. Faced with this situation, he decided to retire voluntarily in 1792. A careful study of his correspondence and conversations before and after retirement reveals several factors that influenced his retirement decision to varying degrees. Advanced age and declining health. He once likened himself to a weary traveler, in need of a resting place, expressing that after contributing to the country in his prime, he discovered fear returning in old age, and that seeking retirement became necessary. Tired of partisan politics, his wish has always been to establish a stable, happy country with a united and coordinated government. He is weary of the inevitable partisan struggles in a capitalist country, considering them a harm to national stability. The disparity between idealism and reality has left him in distress, especially when faced with malicious criticism. He expressed, "Tired of being tormented by mediocre works in public publications, and no one is as bound by public life as I am, nor does anyone fervently desire retirement like me." John Adams described a conversation with him on March 24, 1796. He was clearly informed that his days in office would be short. This point was repeated at least 3 times. Although the current term was very short-lived, it was insignificant to him personally. He also mentioned that as president, "It has always been my most sincere wish to try to understand and comply with public sentiment consistently." He also stated, "In America, the sacred flame of liberty and the destiny of republican government are deeply rooted, even permanently entrenched. It is evident that the absence of deep feudal traditions in America provided him with the opportunity to break free from the old tradition of lifetime tenure. The American people's opposition to monarchical rule and their struggle for democratic rights served as a strong backing for his establishment of the 2-term retirement tradition." Regardless of the reasons behind his retirement, his denial of the prevalent monarchical and lifetime tenure systems in the world at that time contributed significantly to the major developments in the bourgeois republican system. His 2-term retirement was a pioneering initiative in modern history, marking the first escape from the shackles of feudal traditions.